Welcome. Today we're diving into a story of astonishing engineering feats and strategic surprises in the Pacific War. Imagine an island jungle transformed into a bustling military hub in just 20 days, by a small team with only 6 tractors and 387 men. How was such a rapid construction possible, defying all expectations? Could the Japanese military have underestimated American capabilities so profoundly? Why did their intelligence reports predicting a year-long delay turn out to be so disastrously wrong? And what does this tell us about the true power behind America's wartime success? All these pieces, an airstrip built in weeks instead of months, the resilience of American engineers under relentless attack, and Japan's strategic miscalculations form a puzzle that raises a crucial question. How did a handful of American engineers outpace a mighty empire and change the course of the Pacific conflict forever? In this video, we will uncover the hidden facts, dissect the strategic impact, and reveal the shocking reality behind this rapid transformation, separating myth from truth and exposing the secret strength that turned the tide of war. Get ready, because what you're about to learn will challenge everything you thought you knew about wartime engineering, logistics, and the true nature of victory. The story begins right now. Morning of July 20th, 1942, unfolded with heavy humidity and an oppressive atmosphere that seemed to hang over the southern Pacific region. On the island of Espiritu Santo, an extraordinary transformation was underway, something that defied the expectations and logic of conventional warfare. Where lush, wild, virgin jungle had sprawled merely 20 days prior, American military engineers and workers, armed with determination and modern construction machinery, were rapidly transforming the landscape. With relentless efficiency, they laid down a 6,000-foot airstrip, a feat that, according to Japanese military doctrine, should have taken months, if not years, and required thousands of laborers. Yet this improbable achievement was accomplished by a relatively small detachment of the United States Navy's Construction Battalion, known colloquially as the CBS, utilizing only 6 tractors, 2 scrapers, and a total of 387 men. This rapid feat of construction effectively challenged long-held assumptions about military logistics and engineering capabilities. Unlike many other wartime acts that might be chronicled through detailed memoirs or diary entries, there are no surviving Japanese personal accounts specifically describing this moment of ingenuity and rapid development. Nevertheless, the importance of this event was not lost to Japanese intelligence, which swiftly became aware of what had transpired. Through captured documents and interrogations conducted after the war, historians and analysts have pieced together a clear picture. Japanese military planners had grossly underestimated the speed and scale at which American engineering units could operate in hostile territory. Pre-war intelligence estimates, preserved within translated signals intelligence reports, known as the Automated Telegram Information System, or ATIS documents, had predicted that the United States would need a minimum of 12 months or more to move from securing a given island to launching offensive operations. These assessments were based on assumptions rooted in traditional military logistics, which emphasized slow, labor-intensive construction and extensive planning. Yet reality on the ground would shatter these expectations. The swift construction of airfields and logistical hubs by American engineers demonstrated a capability that was not only faster than anticipated, but also a demonstration of strategic prowess that profoundly altered the course of operations across the Pacific. This story is not primarily told through vivid diary entries or detailed personal memoirs, much of which were destroyed during the chaos of war. Instead, it emerges piecemeal through the meticulous examination of American construction records, strategic analysis of Japanese decisions, and the limited surviving Japanese archival sources that end after the conflict's conclusion. The narrative's power lies in cold facts, comprehensive statistics, and undeniable strategic impacts. These elements reveal a harsh reality. Japanese commanders and strategists were forced to confront an enemy whose industrial and engineering capacity far exceeded their own in ways they had never anticipated or prepared for. The first significant encounter the Japanese had with American construction capabilities on a broad scale occurred during the Guadalcanal campaign. It was here that the true extent of American engineering skill and logistical flexibility was initially glimpsed. though its full importance would only be understood in the aftermath. When United States Marines landed on August the 7th in the year of 1942, they quickly seized a predominantly complete Japanese airfield at Lunga Point. This airfield, later known as Henderson Field, was initially built by Japanese forces using a workforce of nearly 2,700 individuals, comprising a mix of Japanese nationals, Koreans, and local civilians, who laboriously worked for over a month to construct a facility that would serve as a crucial base for Allied operations. Within just 6 days of the American landings, this airfield was fully operational, a remarkable achievement considering the scale in the hostile environment. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion, the first combat-ready CB unit, arrived in the early days of September, bringing with them a modest force of 387 men and 5 officers. What they undertook subsequently would establish a pattern that would repeat itself across multiple Pacific islands, transforming the way the Japanese perceived American logistical and engineering capabilities. These specialized units of the Navy began immediately expanding and improving Henderson Field, despite facing relentless enemy bombardments. Japanese forces, based at nearby Rabaul, launched daily raids, particularly around midday, featuring Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers, attempting to disrupt the ongoing construction efforts. One particularly intense attack occurred during the night of October the 13th into the 14th, in which Japanese battleships Kongo and Haruna launched a heavy bombardment, firing shells exceeding 1,094 pounds in weight. Their pounding inflicted over 900 shells that created 53 craters across the runway. Yet by dawn, the American engineers had already restored the airfield's functionality, showing an almost unprecedented resilience and logistical mastery. This pattern, established at Guadalcanal, foreshadowed a broader strategic reality. American construction units and their ability to rapidly build and repair vital military infrastructure became a key factor in the Pacific theater, forcing Japanese commanders to continually adapt to an enemy capable of outpacing them in engineering and logistical agility. This capability, initially underestimated, soon proved to be a decisive element in the Allied advance. Fundamentally, the tactical responses of Japanese military command during this period unmistakably underscore their growing awareness of the formidable construction capabilities emerging from American efforts. In a significant strategic shift, Admiral Yamamoto himself reoriented the primary mission of the combined fleet from direct support of ground forces to a focused effort aimed at neutralizing Henderson Field. This aircraft installation, which had been rapidly constructed by American engineers, posed an increasing threat to Japanese naval and air operations. The Japanese response to this threat manifested most notably in the deployment of the Tokyo Express, high-speed destroyer runs, which were designed to deliver limited supplies and personnel. Because of their constrained cargo capacity, these swift vessels could not facilitate the transport of heavy equipment or large quantities of supplies, rendering them predominantly suitable for urgent, small-scale resupply missions. This operational adaptation was a direct consequence of Henderson Field's strategic significance and represented a calculated attempt to counteract the disruptive impact of the airfield's presence. The initial Japanese logistical approach was fundamentally altered by the establishment of this hastily built yet heavily utilized airfield. Just a single airbase, constructed with remarkable speed and efficiency, could influence the entire course of the campaign, contributing directly to a crippling shortage of supplies for Japanese forces on Guadalcanal. Over time, this logistical disruption culminated in a situation of chronic starvation among Japanese personnel, gradually eroding their combat effectiveness and morale. This ultimately played a vital role in the eventual collapse of Japanese resistance on the island. In the early attempts to retake Henderson Field, Colonel Kanao Ichiki, leading Japan's first large-scale counteroffensive, harbored high hopes and confidence. His formations, comprising approximately 917 men, were convinced they could restore Japanese control over the airfield. Ichiki's forces set out with the expectation that, given the presumed incomplete or lightly defended state of the airfield, they could swiftly overpower the American defenders and seize the position. Unfortunately for Ichiki, the reality proved far more dire. His unit was decisively defeated and wiped out during the Battle of the Tinnaru, which occurred on the 21st of August, 1942. While Ichiki and many of his men were killed in action, Their personal documents and papers were destroyed with them, leaving little direct insight into their perceptions. However, strategic and operational orders seized from other elements of his unit revealed a fundamental misjudgment on the Japanese side. They did not appreciate the extent of American engineering and construction capabilities. Japanese planners had anticipated finding a partially finished or lightly defended airfield, one that would require prolonged repair and reinforcement. Instead, they encountered a fully operational, well-defended base already hosting 31 Marine aircraft ready for combat, a striking testament to the speed and efficiency of American construction efforts. Meanwhile, Lieutenant General Hirokazu Hyakutake, commanding the Japanese 17th Army, undertook multiple major assaults aimed at recapturing Henderson Field between August and November of 1942. These attempts were based on the flawed assumption that, once damaged, the airfield would need several weeks to restore to operational status. For instance, after the intense naval bombardment conducted in October of that year, the most aggressive effort of the campaign, Hyakutake's staff estimated that the airfield would remain unusable for at least a week. However, these expectations were shattered when the Americans managed to restore the airfield to operational status within a mere matter of hours. This unexpected ability to swiftly repair damage forced the Japanese high command to reassess their strategic assumptions profoundly. The realization that American engineers and logistics personnel could rapidly restore vital military infrastructure forced a reevaluation of future operations and contributed to shifting Japanese strategic planning from hopes of short-term gains to a recognition of the growing industrial and construction disparity between the two powers. This disparity became increasingly evident as the United States expanded its advances into the Central Pacific during 1943. Among the most startling demonstrations of American construction speed was the campaign on the Gilbert Islands, particularly at Tarawa Atoll. The battle for Batio Island, which took place from November 20th to the 23rd of that year, became a stark lesson in American logistical prowess. The Japanese defenders, numbering around 5,000, comprising troops from both the 3rd Special Naval Landing Force and the 7th Special Naval Landing Force, had invested months into fortifying the island prior to the assault. They erected formidable defenses, including a 4,500-foot airstrip primarily built by manual labor, a project that had taken several months of relentless effort. The American Navy's 74th Naval Construction Battalion, often referred to as the CBs, arrived during this campaign and demonstrated their remarkable capabilities. In a time frame that has been confirmed through official action reports, the battalion managed to make the damaged airfield operational within only 15 hours. This feat was not an estimation or a propagandist claim. It was meticulously documented in the operational reports of the battalion, highlighting the extraordinary speed of American military engineering. Although there are no surviving diary entries from Japanese defenders who witnessed and experienced this accomplishment firsthand, in the early months of 1944, the Allied forces had achieved a significant shift in their military capabilities, allowing them to establish air superiority over newly captured territories in mere days, instead of the weeks or even months that had been required just a short time before. This transformation was vividly exemplified by the operations conducted in and around the Marshall Islands during the first half of that year, which served to underscore a startling new reality in mechanized warfare and logistical mastery. At the strategic location of Kwajalein, a key operational hub, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, specifically the 121st Construction Battalion, undertook the formidable task of converting the remnants of Japanese-held installations into a sophisticated and operational airbase. Even as frontline combat was still ongoing in the region, this engineering unit worked tirelessly to overhaul the infrastructure, transforming battered Japanese facilities into a hub capable of supporting significant air operations. Of particular note was the rapid development of a crucial 6,800-foot-long bomber strip carried out by the 110th Naval Construction Battalion. This runway, once damaged and disorganized, was hastily reconstructed into a formidable strip capable of accommodating B-24 Liberator bombers, which were to be deployed in offensive operations against the Japanese stronghold at Truk. The extent to which American construction and logistical capabilities had advanced by this point is starkly highlighted by the failure of Japanese intelligence to accurately gauge the scope and speed of their adversaries' engineering efforts. Archives containing translated documents from the National Institute for Defense Studies reveal that pre-war Japanese assessments grossly underestimated American industrial strength, particularly in the domain of merchant ship construction. Japan's wartime estimates for American merchant vessel output in 1943 had pegged the figure at roughly 5 million tons. In reality, the United States produced approximately 19.2 million tons, an astonishing nearly 400% above initial estimates, a testament to how American industry had been mobilized into a war-shattering machine. Similarly, Japanese strategic intelligence concerning the size of the United States Navy was significantly off the mark. Prior estimates suggested that by December of 1943, the U.S. Navy would comprise roughly 13,070 officers and about 296,000 enlisted personnel. In stark contrast, the actual figures revealed a force exceeding 219,000 officers, nearly 120,000 officer candidates, and over 234,000 enlisted men, more than 7 times the Japanese projections. Yet nowhere was the gap between expected and actual capabilities even more pronounced than in the realm of construction. Japanese military doctrine, as derived from captured manuals and training documents, allocated several months for the construction of major airfield projects, an approach based on the assumption of slow, labor-intensive manual work grounded in traditional methods. The Japanese military lacked any conceptual framework that could effectively anticipate or comprehend the rapid, mechanized, and heavily vehicle-supported construction methods employed by the Americans. Their own construction units, exemplified by the 17th Setsu Infantry's construction teams encountered in the Solomon Islands, operated using basic hand tools, shovels, limited hoses, and small primitive rollers, hardly indicative of the comprehensive mechanization that American engineers had adopted. American engineer battalions, such as those engaged in the Mariana Islands campaign during the summer of 1944, demonstrated capabilities that defied Japanese assumptions and their entire military doctrine. These units deployed with a formidable array of over 140 vehicles and more than 200 pieces of specialized construction equipment, facilitating rapid expansion of forward airfields. The strategic value of this technological and logistical disparity became glaringly apparent during the campaign. The Americans swiftly transformed occupied islands into fully operational bases, capable of supporting the deployment of B-29 Superfortress heavy bombers, aircraft vital for aerial assaults on the Japanese homeland. One particularly vivid example of this engineering prowess unfolded during the Battle for Saipan. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saitito, commanding the Japanese 43rd Division defending the island of Saipan, watched in disbelief as American construction efforts far exceeded anything documented in Japanese military experience or planning. Despite the intense fighting still ongoing in Saipan's northern mountains, the Americans achieved a remarkable feat: the capture and rapid development of the Atsu airfield, located on Saipan, just 3 days after the invasion commenced on June 18, 1944. Within a mere 4 days, the 3rd Battalion of the 20th Marines, alongside the 121st and 18th Construction Battalions, had made the airfield fully operational for P-47 Thunderbolt fighters, transforming a seized Japanese installation into a vital strategic asset within days. By July of that year, while the brutal battle still raged overhead and in the mountains, American engineers continued their aggressive expansion, transforming the airfield to accommodate the eventual arrival of the monumental B-29 Superfortress bombers. The first of these formidable aircraft, named Jolton Josie, arrived at Saipan's newly upgraded airfield on October 12, 1944, signaling a new phase in the Pacific theater. The buildup of strategic bombing capacity aimed directly at the officer later revealed that the entire lengthy process of constructing these initial runways had taken several months, relying heavily on the labor of prisoners and forced workers from the nearby islands. Despite these arduous beginnings, the American engineers at Tinian achieved what initially seemed impossible in a matter of weeks. The scale of their rapid development was astonishing. They transformed the lush, jungle-covered island into a sprawling aerial fortress capable of supporting the most advanced bombers of the time, the B-29 Superfortresses. The enormous task of constructing this vast military complex involved not only the excavation and leveling of land, but also the movement and placement of millions of tons of coral and earth. This was not a simple operation. It was a logistical and engineering marvel, demanding the mobilization of entire fleets of heavy equipment. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, notably the construction battalions, often called the CBs, operated their powerful Caterpillar D7 and D8 bulldozers relentlessly, keeping them running for 20 hours a day, allowing only 4 hours for maintenance. These machines, with their formidable horsepower and hydraulic mechanisms, could accomplish the work that would have taken hundreds of manual laborers many months or even years. In stark contrast, the Japanese forces lacked comparable heavy machinery or engineering expertise. When the 7th Japanese Construction Unit was captured in the Solomon Islands, interrogation revealed that their entire inventory consisted of only 5 trucks, a single steamroller, and basic hand tools, hardly enough to match the scale or speed of American construction efforts. Japanese military doctrine almost entirely valorized the warrior spirit, emphasizing Yamato Damashi, an unwavering spirit of loyalty and sacrifice, over technical prowess or engineering capabilities. Yet at Saipan and nearby Tinian, they witnessed firsthand a new kind of soldier, combat engineers who were both fighters and builders, embodying innovation and resilience. The transformation of Saipan was remarkable in its brevity. What Japanese commanders believed would take months, fortifying their positions sufficiently to withstand invasion, was accomplished by American engineers within weeks. Their ability to construct operational airfields while facing enemy fire was not merely surprising but outright shocking to Japanese military expectations. These engineers proved that material conditions and logistical craftsmanship could be just as vital as traditional combat tactics in determining the outcome of battles. Among the most astonishing examples of American engineering achievement was the rapid and large-scale development of Tinian, which truly rewrote the history of military construction. The 6th Naval Construction Brigade, consisting of about 15,000 men from the construction battalions, CBs, transformed the island into the world's largest bomber base of its time. This massive undertaking, spanning from July 1944 to May 1945, resulted in one of the most extraordinary feats of military engineering in history. The statistics, meticulously documented in the records of the naval construction units, continue to evoke amazement even decades later. The CBs carved out and laid down approximately 6,850-foot runways amid the dense jungle and coral reefs, creating a network of 4 parallel runways at Northfield that could support the takeoff and landing of B-29 superfortresses. These mighty aircraft had a range of nearly 3,000 miles, making the round-trip missions to Japan feasible. Westfield was expanded to include 2 additional runways, further enhancing the island's capacity. To put this into perspective, the total quantity of coral excavated, blasted, and packed into the runways was equivalent to filling Hoover Dam 3 times over. At that time, Japanese forces stationed on Tinian, under the command of Colonel Kiyoshi Ogata, numbered approximately 9,000 troops. Most of these soldiers perished in the fierce defense of the island, but the pace of American construction was apparent even during the ongoing fighting. American engineers and soldiers landed together with the initial assault waves on July 24, 1944, and within less than a week, by August 1st, they were already repairing and expanding the Japanese airfield at Northfield. The Japanese had initially built their runways over many months using forced labor from prisoners brought from nearby islands such as Saipan and Korea. A captured Japanese officer later divulged that their original construction efforts spanned many months, heavily reliant on the brutal and inhumane exploitation of forced labor. Despite the initial difficulties in the formidable natural environment, American engineers quickly surpassed their predecessors' efforts through ingenuity, relentless work, and sheer logistical might. Their work transformed a challenging, jungle-covered island into a formidable launching pad for strategic bombing campaigns against the Japanese homeland, a testament to what disciplined engineering and coordinated effort can achieve in the face of adversity. The detailed engineering documentation from Tinian, translated by ATIS, vividly outlines the construction techniques employed during the island's strategic fortification efforts. According to these records, the process relied heavily on manual labor, with workers crushing corals by hand, using basic tools such as picks and shovels to process construction materials. Concrete mixing was similarly a labor-intensive endeavor, carried out by hand without the aid of mechanized mixers. The report estimates that expanding the runway by approximately 1,000 feet would have required around 1,000 laborers working tirelessly for a period of 2 months. Remarkably, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, specifically the Canadian-born Corps of Engineers personnel, managed to extend Tinian's existing runways by an impressive 4,000 feet in less than 3 decades of days, demonstrating a level of construction efficiency that outstripped Japanese efforts significantly. The profound psychological impact of this swift and mechanically advanced construction capability on remaining Japanese military personnel can be inferred from interrogations conducted by the Office of Naval Intelligence. While these prisoner interrogations primarily focused on gathering military intelligence, several prisoners, without prompting, expressed their astonishment at the American methods of construction and engineering. One captured member of a Japanese naval construction unit remarked openly on the disparity. "We could not compete with the United States Navy's approach, which used bulldozers and power shovels, compared to our own labor-intensive method, relying solely on human shovels and scoops." Such statements underscore the perceived technological superiority of American engineering machinery and its impact on Japanese morale. Among Japanese officers, Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, who commanded the island garrison on Iwima, was arguably the most informed about American military-industrial capabilities. Having served as a military attaché in Washington, D.C., from the year 1928 until 1930, and having traveled extensively across the United States, Kuribayashi's insights provide a rare perspective into U.S. technological proficiency. His personal correspondence to Japan, later published as Letters from the Commander-in-Chief, offers one of the scant surviving Japanese viewpoints on American industrial strength and engineering prowess. On February 18, 1945, when American Marines launched their assault on Iwima, Kuribayashi commanded approximately 21,000 Japanese defenders. For months prior, he meticulously prepared the island's defenses, transforming it into an underground fortress designed to withstand prolonged assault. Japanese construction units had created an extensive network of around 11 miles of tunnels, underground command posts, and hidden artillery positions. This construction represented one of the most ambitious Japanese engineering projects of the war, completed over a sustained period of many months. The American approach to construction and fortification, in stark contrast, reflected a different set of priorities, favoring rapid deployment in offensive capability over concealment or elaborate fortifications. The Americans prioritized speed and mechanical power, deploying large-scale equipment such as bulldozers and power shovels, rather than relying solely on manual labor. The assault was supported by the landing of the 31st and 133rd Naval Construction Battalions, also known as Seabees. The 133rd NCB, attached to the 4th Marine Division, suffered the highest casualties among construction battalions during the Pacific Island campaigns, with approximately 40 killed, 156 wounded, and 48 evacuated due to sickness out of about 1,100 men. Despite these significant losses and the ongoing combat conditions, the pace of construction and repair exceeded what Japanese engineers might have deemed possible. Within days of the initial landings, damaged Japanese airfields were being swiftly repaired and brought back into operation. By February the 26th, merely a week after the initial landings, D-Day, the very first American aircraft, an OY-1 artillery spotting plane, successfully landed on the recently repaired airfield. As the battle persisted into March, even amid intense fighting and aerial bombardments, the first B-29 Superfortress made an emergency landing at Iwima. The aircraft, from the 9th Bombardment Group, had been damaged during an attack over Tokyo and was unable to return to the Mariana Islands. The rapid repair and recovery of the airfield played a critical role in supporting ongoing military operations in the region. Unfortunately, Lieutenant General Kuribayashi did not live to witness the culmination of these engineering feats. He was killed during the final Japanese assault on Ma, unable to record his impressions of the American construction methods and their implications for the Japanese military's capabilities. On April 1, 1945, swiftly secured control over two critical airfields, Kadana and Yontan, both of which had been astonishingly left largely undefended by the Japanese forces. a decision that seemed inexplicable at the time. These airfields, once captured, became pivotal hubs for the advancing American forces, and by April 3rd, units such as the CBS of the 58th Battalion alongside the 1901 Aviation Engineer Battalion had begun repair operations, diligently working to extend and restore these vital facilities. Remarkably, within just a few days, American combat aircraft were flying sorties directly from these bases, offering close air support to ground troops battling fiercely on the island's surface. The scale and speed of construction that followed the initial landings were nothing short of extraordinary, setting a new standard for military engineering under combat conditions. Over the course of the campaign, a staggering number of around 95,000 personnel from Army and Navy construction units tirelessly worked on building a comprehensive military infrastructure that would sustain the American war effort on Okinawa. Their efforts included the development of facilities capable of accommodating up to 4,000 aircraft, a sizable air power projection that would have been unthinkable prior to the campaign. The vast construction project was coordinated across multiple specialized units, including the 8th, 10th, 70th, and 11th Naval Construction Brigades. These units didn't merely focus on airfields. Their scope encompassed the creation of entire port facilities capable of handling large ships and cargo, ammunition storage depots, hospitals equipped to deal with battlefield casualties, and extensive supply depots to ensure sustained logistics. The result was the rapid development of an entire military city in the midst of ongoing combat, a feat that would later astonish even the most seasoned military observers. Throughout the battle, Yahara, the senior operations officer of the Japanese 32nd Army, documented his observations in his memoir, The Battle for Okinawa. While he concentrated more on the tactical and strategic implications of the American campaign, his writings also reflect a growing awareness of the formidable engineering capabilities the United States was deploying. These abilities extended well beyond traditional combat roles. They effectively turned the island into a mobile military base complex that could support sustained operations far beyond what Japanese military doctrine had anticipated. Yahara's insights are particularly valuable because he had a unique background that gave him a more nuanced understanding of American military strength. From 1933 to 1935, he served as an exchange officer in the United States, during which he studied at Fort Moultrie and traveled extensively across American military installations. This experience provided Yahara with a more sophisticated appreciation of American logistical and engineering capabilities than most of his Japanese peers possessed at the time. However, even with this background, the rapid and extensive construction efforts he observed at Okinawa surpassed his expectations. The statistical scope of American construction efforts at Okinawa remains deeply staggering to this day, revealing a level of logistical and engineering prowess that could hardly be matched by contemporary standards. Within mere hours of landing on April 1st, American forces had not only gained control of those two strategically vital airfields, but had also begun a massive undertakings to repair and expand them. This rapid development was critical to establishing air superiority and sustaining the subsequent phases of the campaign. By April 3rd, units such as the CBS of the 58th Battalion and the 1901 Aviation Engineer Battalion had mobilized to repair, extend, and improve the airfields, transforming them into full operational bases within a remarkably short time frame. In the span of less than a week, fighters and bombers were taking off from Yantan and Kadana, directly supporting ground operations and striking Japanese positions with increasing effectiveness. The construction efforts quickly evolved into an immense logistical undertaking, one that would eventually involve nearly 95,000 personnel, dedicated solely to building and maintaining the infrastructure necessary for such an expansive military operation. Their work laid the foundation for the possibility of establishing a formidable Air Force presence, with facilities purposely designed to handle around 4,000 aircraft, an extraordinary capacity that demonstrated the extent of American logistical planning and engineering innovation. In addition to establishing the airfields, the Americans constructed large port facilities capable of handling ships and supplies, along with ammunition dumps, hospitals, and supply depots, effectively creating a city dedicated entirely to sustaining the military presence and supporting ongoing combat operations. The scale of this effort was unprecedented and displayed a level of coordination and engineering skill that would influence future military logistics. Throughout these intense and rapidly evolving developments, Yahara's memoir reveals that his awareness of American engineering superiority grew stronger. Although his primary focus was on tactical and strategic concerns, such as troop movements, battle formations, and logistical patterns, his detailed descriptions implicitly acknowledge the limitations Japanese forces faced compared to the seemingly relentless American capacity for construction and rapid deployment. He notes that American forces, with their overwhelming industrial and logistical support, could develop infrastructure quickly in the midst of combat, a feature that confounded Japanese strategic planning and underscored the technological and organizational disparity between the two armies. This capacity for swift and large-scale construction in the danger zone. In the relentless and often brutal contest for dominance in the Pacific theater, the capacity of each side to rapidly establish secure and functional military bases proved to be a decisive factor in shaping the course of the conflict. American forces, under SEAL leaders such as Yahara, developed the ability to set up operational footholds at a pace that outstripped the Japanese military's capacity for retaliatory action. This technological and logistical prowess allowed the Americans to respond swiftly to Japanese offensives, quickly reinforcing and expanding their positions through the construction of advanced facilities that were erected at an astonishing speed, often within days or weeks. Yahara's detailed account of the Japanese counteroffensive launched on the 19th of April offers a vivid illustration of one aspect of this ongoing struggle. His observations expose the inherent futility faced by Japanese forces when attempting to launch attacks against American-held positions, which continuously benefited from rapid reinforcement. These American strongholds were not static. Instead, they were dynamic, expanding nodes of logistical and military activity, sustained and supplied through a network of swiftly constructed bases and supply points. This relentless cycle of construction and reinforcement significantly hampered Japanese efforts to mount effective counterattacks. What Yahara perhaps sensed but might not have been able to fully express was a fundamental difference in military philosophy that underpinned these contrasting approaches. The Japanese military worldview placed considerable emphasis on the spiritual dimension of warfare, an often romanticized belief that the warrior's spirit, squeezed from ideals of honor, resolve, and unyielding perseverance, could compensate for or even triumph over material shortcomings. This philosophy viewed the battlefield as a domain where the moral resolve of soldiers could tilt the balance, regardless of technological or logistical disadvantages. In stark contrast, American military strategy was rooted in the integration of industrial capability with combat operations. The United States harnessed advanced engineering, logistics, and manufacturing processes, elements that transformed the battlefield into a theater of technological ingenuity. American forces, particularly the combat engineers, exemplified this integrated approach. They were dual-skilled, able to wield rifles effectively in combat while simultaneously operating heavy machinery such as bulldozers with equal proficiency. Their organization embodied a direct merger of civilian construction expertise with military necessity, leading to a level of operational efficiency that the Japanese could not match. The Japanese military lacked an equivalent force composed of combat engineers trained to build and fight simultaneously. Their construction units were either limited military engineers equipped with scant machinery or civilian laborers forcibly conscripted into service, who possessed little or no combat training. For instance, during the conquest of the Solomon Islands, interrogations of captured personnel from the 17th of July unit revealed that these so-called builders had minimal equipment and no combat readiness whatsoever. They functioned solely as laborers, destined to perform manual tasks, rather than as the warrior builders who epitomized the United States Construction Battalion, better known as the Seabees. The full scope of this critical disparity in capabilities, however, was only thoroughly understood after the conclusion of the war. The strategy used to uncover these differences came from the comprehensive strategic bombing surveys conducted from 1945 through 1946. These investigations included detailed interrogations of Japanese military and civilian officials, as well as diligent analysis of captured documents translated by the Army Technical Intelligence Service, ATIS. The examination of these sources illuminated the extent to which Japanese planners had fundamentally misjudged American industrial and construction strengths. It became painfully clear that American capability in rapidly building and transforming captured islands into forward bases far exceeded Japanese expectations. A striking example of this misjudgment was the American ability to construct a 6,000-foot runway capable of accommodating large heavy bombers, something Japanese strategists believed would require a labor force of 3,000 to 5,000 workers working diligently for 3 to 6 months. In reality, the American Construction Battalion Task Force achieved this feat with just over 1,000 men in roughly 20 days, a performance that defied all pre-war estimates. This 5 to 6-fold increase in efficiency was not a mere fluke, but a reflection of the American capacity to deploy multiple construction battalions simultaneously in different locations. Such organizational agility allowed American forces to accelerate their base-building efforts exponentially, speed that Japanese planners had never envisioned as even theoretically possible. The technological ductility of American engineering equipment further amplified this advantage. The equipment gap between the two sides was as stark as the logistical disparity. A single D8 bulldozer, with its immense power, could shift in just 1 hour more earth and material than 300 manual laborers working tirelessly throughout an entire day. By the year 1944, American forces in the Pacific Theater were equipped with hundreds of these heavy machines, ensuring efficient and rapid construction that enabled sustained offensive operations. Meanwhile, the Japanese suffered from a severe shortage of heavy construction machinery, particularly bulldozers, which limited their ability to build large-scale airstrips or fortified bases quickly. Captured American equipment was thus highly prized. Their bulldozers and other engineering machines represented a technological bounty that was coveted more than almost any other piece of wartime hardware. The disparity in construction capabilities between the opposing forces revealed deeper-rooted differences in industrial strength and organizational approach. While the Japanese military's construction efforts remained heavily influenced by traditional methods, these techniques were largely derived from civilian practices that had been adapted for military needs over time. This reliance on established manual methods reflected not only resource limitations, but also entrenched cultural values. Japanese military doctrine placed a significant emphasis on spiritual resilience and physical endurance. Manual labor was thus viewed as more than just a practical necessity. It was also regarded as a means of character development and spiritual growth. Workers with picks, shovels, and human-powered carts symbolized a disciplined, resilient spirit that prioritized moral strength over technological advancement. In stark contrast, American military engineering had fully embraced the principles of industrialization. The engineers recruited from civilian construction industries brought with them extensive practical experience and modern techniques normally employed in large-scale civilian projects. These skilled personnel applied time and motion studies, established routine maintenance schedules for equipment, and adopted standardized construction procedures, practices common in the United States but largely absent from Japanese military building efforts. American construction methods prioritize prefabrication, mass-producing components like master matting, modular Quonset huts, and standardized fuel tanks in factories, which could then be shipped and assembled efficiently as complete units. This standardized approach allowed for rapid, consistent, and scalable construction across various locations in the Pacific Theater. Japanese construction, by comparison, depended heavily on local materials and bespoke, site-specific construction methods. Such an approach resulted in slower build times and less uniformity across different installations. The tangible consequences of these differences became increasingly apparent to the Japanese forces as American construction capabilities matured. The psychological impact on the Japanese can be inferred from the limited sources available, including prisoner interrogations, captured correspondence, often censored, and testimonies documented after the war. While no comprehensive collection of personal accounts exists, the overall pattern reveals a progression from initial overconfidence, through confusion, and ultimately toward a sense of helplessness. In the early stages of the conflict, Japanese confidence was reinforced by their military doctrine, rooted in the ideal of Yamato Damashi, the spirit of the Japanese people. This ideology held that spiritual resilience and collective willpower could compensate for material inferiority. The swift victories at Pearl Harbor and the rapid conquest of large swaths of the Pacific seemed to confirm the legitimacy of this worldview. Japanese forces had managed to defeat Western powers with equipment considered inferior, relying heavily on their fighting spirit and unwavering resolve. However, the first signs of doubt appeared during encounters with American construction and logistical intelligence at Guadalcanal. The rapid completion of facilities like Henderson Field, along with their ability to withstand relentless bombardment, underscored a crucial truth. Organization, industrial strength, and technological prowess could not be simply replaced by morale alone. These American capabilities demonstrated an organizational and industrial capacity that Japanese forces could not emulate, regardless of their spiritual conviction. By 2043, the evidence of American technological and infrastructural superiority weighed heavily on Japanese military personnel, especially through captured documents and interrogations. Prisoners from construction units expressed astonishment at the advanced machinery and methods used by their adversaries. The strategic implications of this technological and infrastructural gap became clearer to Japanese commanders with each passing month. Every American-built airfield, supply depot, or port could be operational within days of completion, reinforcing the perception that the United States industrial might was an unstoppable force on the battlefield. This mounting realization and the tangible demonstrations of American engineering prowess gradually eroded Japanese confidence, sowing doubts about the efficacy of their own traditional, less mechanized methods. The contrast between the two approaches, manual, labor-intensive Japanese techniques versus the rapid, standardized, and industrialized American procedures, highlighted not only technological disparities, but also fundamentally different organizational philosophies. The visual evidence of American efficiency and scale, witnessed through captured installations, reinforced the belief that industrial power could determine the outcome of the Pacific War. This shift from early, unquestioning optimism to a clearer understanding of American superiority marked a pivotal psychological turning point for Japanese forces, shaping their strategic decisions and morale in the subsequent years of conflict. By the time the conflict intensified, the strategically chosen sites for launching attacks had shifted, with D becoming the foundation for mounting the next offensive operation. The originally envisioned defensive perimeter, painstakingly devised to wear down American forces through prolonged sieges and attritional warfare, was being systematically circumvented through a new and innovative tactic: rapid base construction that facilitated a classic island-hopping campaign. This approach allowed for the swift establishment of forward airfields and support facilities on a chain of islands, effectively bypassing heavily fortified but less strategically valuable locations. As a result, by the year of 1944, the psychological effect of this rapid, unpredictable advance was felt deeply even among senior military commanders. They recognized that the traditional defensive strategies were losing their relevance in the face of relentless and fast-paced American operational flexibility. The fall of Saipan marked a turning point. This island's capture placed the formidable B-29 superfortresses within striking distance of the Japanese mainland. Such an achievement directly contributed to the resignation of Japan's military government, including the fall of Prime Minister Hideki Tojo's administration. High-ranking military strategists understood perfectly well that America's increasing capacity for airfield construction meant that no island could be considered secure for long. Each overrun territory would immediately become a launching point for future strikes directly aimed at Japan itself. As American engineers and builders accelerated the construction of massive B-29 bases on Tinian and Saipan, Japan found itself unable to keep pace with the rapidly expanding American infrastructure. The rate of construction, in fact, outstripped the Japanese effort to develop effective countermeasures to these new bases. The final stages of Japan's war effort reveal a picture of increased desperation. Defenders shifted from traditional defensive tactics, attempting to prevent landing operations, towards establishing fortified positions that would fight the Americans from well-prepared and heavily mined defensive lines. These strategies reflected a clear acceptance of an inevitable reality. The Americans would land regardless of initial resistance, supported by vast logistical and air support networks. Consequently, the Japanese military abandoned hopes of merely blocking invasions on the beaches and instead designed strategies to inflict the highest possible casualties, aiming to make each American landing so costly in lives and resources that the Allies might reconsider and seek negotiations for peace. The strategic influence of American construction capabilities, particularly those offered by the CBS, fundamentally changed the entire course of the Pacific War. This transformation went far beyond simply building bases faster than the Japanese could respond. It represented a revolution in military strategy itself, facilitated by advances in construction technology and organizational efficiency. The entire island-hopping campaign relied heavily on the ability to rapidly develop and deploy airfields and support facilities on newly captured islands, turning them into stepping stones for the next phase of the offensive. Admiral Chester Nimitz's decision to bypass the major Japanese base at Rabaul, which had been a central point of opposition in the Southwest Pacific, exemplified this new strategy. The success of bypassing Rabaul rested on the ability to quickly construct airfields on surrounding islands, which could then project air power effectively to neutralize Japanese strongholds without direct assault. The timeline of these campaigns was dramatically compressed compared to initial expectations. Pre-war Japanese military planning had assumed that any American offensive in the Pacific would require years of deliberate, slow advance, including extensive pauses to construct supporting bases along the way. American forces, however, advanced from Guadalcanal to Okinawa in less than 3 years, covering a distance of more than 3,000 miles in the process. Each newly captured island swiftly became a supportive base, enabling the next phase of the campaign to proceed with minimal delay. Meanwhile, a significant disconnect existed between the realities experienced by Japanese military units in the field and the narrative being propagated to their home front. Wartime Japanese censorship was extensive, deliberately suppressing information about the true extent of American industrial and construction capabilities, which were exponentially outstripping Japanese expectations. Letters sent home from Japanese soldiers frequently underwent strict censorship, with references to American engineering speed, the quality of American equipment, or the material superiority of their bases being routinely erased or altered. Only a handful of uncensored letters survived, and most of these were from soldiers whose correspondence never reached the Japanese public or government, often because they never made it past the censors. These rare uncensored letters, mostly those that were never allowed to be delivered, reveal a sense of wonder and amazement among Japanese troops regarding the extraordinary pace of American construction and logistics. Nonetheless, this newfound awareness was largely kept from the civilian population. Official propaganda continued portraying Americans as weak and spiritually dependent, a narrative carefully crafted to bolster Japanese morale and justify their wartime sacrifices. In essence, the war in the Pacific was not merely a conflict of gunfire and strategy, but also a battle of information and perception. The massive American infrastructural effort, with its rapid, relentless construction of airfields, bases, and logistical support, immensely contributed to the swift unraveling of Japanese defenses and the eventual shift in the strategic balance of power in favor of the Allies. The ability to build and operationalize bases at break. During the turbulent years of World War II, the Japanese military and civilian populations found themselves unable to grasp the true strength and resilience of American forces, nor did they fully understand the technological and logistical advancements that had been meticulously developed behind the scenes. While Japanese propaganda, reinforced by broadcasts from Radio Tokyo, carefully monitored and translated by American intelligence, constantly emphasized the supposed spiritual superiority of the Japanese warrior ethos over America's material pursuits, the stark realities of the battlefield painted a very different picture for the United States. In truth, the Americans possessed not only overwhelming logistical and material superiority, but also demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for endurance and adaptability under some of the most brutal combat conditions. However, this compelling truth was deliberately obscured from Japanese civilians through a concerted effort to distort facts and control information. Even when military reports accurately described events on the ground, the Japanese narrative was carefully manipulated to portray their losses as heroic acts of defiance against insurmountable odds. For instance, the fall of Saipan, a pivotal campaign in the Pacific Theater, was depicted as a gallant, heroic stand against a numerically superior enemy, with no acknowledgement of the strategic advantage gained by American forces, who had already established operational bases for the B-29 Superfortress bomber, while fighting continued in the area. Similarly, the swift American advance through the Philippines was attributed solely to numerical strength, as if sheer numbers alone could explain the rapid conquest, intentionally omitting the crucial fact that the Americans had begun erecting extensive supporting bases at a pace previously thought impossible. This information gap was not without consequence. It played a significant role in sustaining Japanese civilian morale for as long as possible. It was only when the heavy and sustained B-29 bombing campaigns intensified in late 1944 that the veneer of invincibility began to crack. The Japanese population struggled to comprehend how American bombers could suddenly reach the Japanese homeland when their defensive perimeter was ostensibly holding. The truth was that American construction battalions, known as the Army Corps of Engineers, had meticulously built enormous airfield complexes on captured islands within just a few months. These bases enabled relentless bombing campaigns against Japan, yet many in Japan remained unaware of the scale and speed of this infrastructural revolution. When examining the final tally of American construction efforts across the Pacific, one can begin to understand the depth of Japan's defeat. By the conclusion of hostilities, the combined efforts of CBS Broadcasting and the Army's engineering units had transformed the vast Pacific theater into a sprawling network of strategically positioned American bases. This network rendered Japan's strategic position increasingly untenable and hopeless. During the war, the total strength of the Army's construction battalions, popularly known as the CBS, reached approximately 325,000 men, with about 80% of those personnel stationed and working across the Pacific region. This formidable workforce was responsible for building an astounding number of military and logistical structures, 111 major airstrips, 441 piers, and numerous airfield facilities. They also constructed ammunition magazines and storage warehouses, 2,558 in total, that spanned an area equivalent to 700 city blocks. Housing accommodations for 1.5 million servicemen were erected, alongside fuel storage facilities that could contain 100 million gallons of gasoline. Over 300 military bases were established across as many different islands, transforming the Allied logistical footprint into an almost impregnable network. The scale of equipment deployed for such vast construction efforts was staggering. During the war, more than 50,000 bulldozers were produced, thousands of which were dispatched to the Pacific to carry out relentless construction, earth-moving, and repairs. The Caterpillar D7 bulldozer became the symbol of Pacific construction efforts. Weighing approximately 15,000 pounds and capable of exerting 25,000 pounds of drawbar pull, this machine was the backbone of rapid infrastructure development. Japanese forces, in contrast, lacked comparable machinery or technological innovations to keep pace with such rapid and large-scale construction. One of the most groundbreaking innovations was the development of men matting, a type of pierced steel planking that revolutionized aircraft runway construction. Captured and assembled from prefabricated sections, each mat measured 10 feet in length, 15 inches in width, and weighed only 66 pounds, yet contained 87 drainage holes. By 1943, American factories had produced enough master plate matting to construct nearly 240 runways, each measuring 5,000 feet in length and 150 feet in width. The total production of steel for these mats reached approximately 2 million tons, an amount equivalent to the steel used in constructing 600 Liberty ships. The prefabricated nature of these runway mats allowed rapid deployment. Once laid, they transformed cleared battlefield areas into fully operational airfields within hours, a feat previously thought impossible. Perhaps the most remarkable indicators of American logistical efficiency stemmed from their ability to repair and maintain airstrips under intense enemy attack. At Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, for example, the combined efforts throughout the course of the Pacific War, the remarkable speed and efficiency of American military engineering efforts often overshadowed other aspects of the conflict. These feats of construction and rebuilding not only challenged conventional expectations, but frequently set new standards in military logistics and infrastructure development. Indeed, the rapid pace at which the United States could erect vital airfields, supply depots, and port facilities played a pivotal role in disrupting Japanese strategic plans and hastening the ultimate victory in the region. From the outset, American engineers demonstrated an extraordinary ability to significantly cut down construction times, setting early benchmarks that seemed almost inconceivable at the time. One notable example occurred in July of 1942, when a team completed the construction of an airstrip on the island of Espiritu Santo in just 20 days. This achievement marked a historic milestone, illustrating that it was possible to transform a remote jungle or coral atoll into a functioning military base faster than ever before, a feat that had profound implications for logistical planning and operational tempo. By the year of 1943, this trend of astonishing speed was well established. The 47th Naval Construction Battalion, often called Seabees, managed to build a 3,300-foot runway on the relatively isolated island of Vanuatu in a mere 9 days. This rapid construction was more than just impressive. It exemplified a strategic advantage, providing the Allies with new launching points in the Pacific in record time and forcing the Japanese to adapt to a battlefield where the enemy's logistical support could arrive almost overnight. The same period also witnessed the dramatic improvisation and accelerated repair of existing facilities. In November of the same year, engineers managed to rehabilitate the airfield on Tarawa in an astonishing 15 hours. This rapid turnaround demonstrated that even damaged or captured Japanese facilities could be brought back into operational use with remarkable speed. Such agility was crucial, as it meant that the Allies could quickly establish air superiority and push deeper into enemy territory, often before the Japanese military could adequately respond or establish defensive perimeters. The island of Tinian, in particular, stood as a testament to the scale and capacity of American military construction. Within less than a year, approximately 15,000 construction battalion personnel managed to turn this remote atoll into what became the world's most formidable airbase complex of the entire war. The site featured 4 parallel runways, each measuring over 8,500 feet in length. These runways were capable of launching up to 100 Boeing B-29 Superfortresses daily, a staggering rate that underscored the strategic potency of the base. In fact, this single installation, constructed within months and designed to facilitate the mounting of devastating air campaigns, had the potential to inflict more destruction and deliver more explosive power to Japan than the entire Japanese military might could muster in its own defense. Okinawa, the largest and most intense battleground of the Pacific Campaign, saw an even more dramatic transformation through American engineering efforts. Pre-invasion plans aimed to create a complex of facilities capable of supporting 4,000 aircraft, a figure that far exceeded the Japanese Air Force's remaining operational aircraft at the time. These provisional airfields, port facilities supporting the invasion fleet, extensive ammunition storage depots to sustain prolonged operations against Japan, hospitals prepared to treat the anticipated casualties, and supply depots stockpiling resources for millions of advancing troops all sprang into existence amidst the fierce fighting. When Japan finally surrendered, the infrastructure built on Okinawa stood as a silent testament to the relentless, rapid construction campaigns that underpinned the Allied strategy, though many of these facilities never saw the full deployment they were designed for. At the height of the campaign, approximately 95,000 construction troops on Okinawa were working tirelessly to establish the logistical backbone for the final assault on the Japanese mainland. Their efforts were characterized by a relentless drive to build, repair, and expand facilities that would sustain the largest amphibious operation of the war, illustrating the central role played by military engineering in securing victory. As impressive as these achievements were, the implications of American construction capabilities extended beyond the immediate battlefield. Most senior Japanese military officers who witnessed firsthand the scope and speed of American engineering efforts did not survive the war, but a convergence of diverse evidentiary sources offers a compelling narrative about how the Japanese perceived and understood these displays of engineering prowess. Detailed American construction records provide precise timelines, statistics, and technical data that highlight the extraordinary pace at which facilities were erected or repaired. Meanwhile, Japanese strategic decision-making reveals an increasing awareness of the significance of these engineering feats. The remaining Japanese testimonies, though limited, afford a rare glimpse into their professional astonishment and growing desperation as they realize the untenable nature of their positions. Among these, Colonel Hirami Yahara's accounts are especially valuable. He survived the war and later penned a memoir that provides critical insights into Japanese officers' perceptions of American construction capabilities. Yahara vividly described the American construction process during Okinawa, noting that it was executed with a mechanical and almost surgical precision. He observed that American engineers would sometimes work more than half a mile ahead of the front lines, diligently surveying, and the rapidity with which American forces could establish forward air bases had fundamentally changed the landscape of military strategy in the Pacific theater, rendering traditional naval tactics largely obsolete. The United States' ability to swiftly seize islands and convert them into operational hubs meant that any initial resistance by Japanese defenders was quickly outflanked and rendered less effective. Each island takeover amplified American air power projection further westward, shrinking the Japanese defensive perimeter at a pace that outstripped their capacity to adapt or reinforce their positions. This remarkable shift in operational tempo demonstrated not only technological superiority, but also a strategic advantage that was difficult for Japan to counter through conventional means. Interestingly, a purely military account of these technological and strategic developments is incomplete without considering the insights of the Japanese engineers responsible for constructing fortifications and logistical support across the occupied territories. Post-war interrogations conducted with surviving members of the Japanese construction units revealed a deep sense of professional astonishment regarding American construction methods. A particular engineer from the 17th Engineering Unit, a man whose name remains undocumented in the surviving archives, famously remarked that observing American construction efforts was akin to witnessing the future in action. He described how machines could accomplish in mere hours what his own units would typically take weeks to complete using manual labor, highlighting a fundamental disparity in industrial capability and technological sophistication. However, beyond individual testimonials, strategic decisions made by Japanese commanders reflected a profound understanding of American construction prowess. The choice not to defend certain beaches, such as those at Iwima and Okinawa, but instead to prepare and fight from more fortified positions inland, was rooted in the recognition that American forces would inevitably establish a beachhead with supporting facilities, regardless of the initial resistance offered. This tactical shift from holding territory at all costs to merely delaying the inevitable and inflicting casualties symbolized a clear acknowledgement. Defending every inch of coastline was futile when faced with American engineering and logistical capabilities. This realization also shed light on some of Japan's more radical responses to the escalating American materials and infrastructure development. The Kamikaze campaign, which involved suicide attacks against Allied ships and targets, can be viewed in part as an effort to compensate for the loss of strategic or territorial advantages that American construction was rapidly eroding. Traditional naval aviation relied heavily on well-developed bases, extensive maintenance facilities, and trained ground crews, assets that became increasingly difficult to sustain as American construction battalions systematically developed a network of bases moving steadily closer to Japan itself. Meanwhile, Japanese facilities were being destroyed or rendered useless, leading to the gradual erosion of the material basis for conventional air operations. In this context, kamikaze missions, requiring only one-way fuel and minimal maintenance, represented a desperate but innovative attempt to extend air capability despite the diminishing infrastructure support. They symbolized an effort to continue offensive operations in the face of relentless American engineering, effectively bypassing the need for traditional base facilities and attempting to cripple American naval and air operations in a different manner. In the aftermath of the war, captured Japanese intelligence documents shed light on efforts to develop countermeasures aimed at undermining or thwarting American construction capabilities. Plans were formulated for specialized infiltration units tasked with sabotaging construction equipment and assassinating operators to delay or halt American project timelines. There were even considerations of deploying chemical agents designed to contaminate construction sites thereby crippling American logistical efforts through biological or chemical means. However, these clandestine plans, reflecting both Japanese ingenuity and desperation, were largely ineffective. They were either foiled by stringent American security measures or failed to materialize due to operational complexities. By 1945, the full scope of American construction capabilities was well understood among Japanese military leadership. Strategic planning documents of that period reveal an acute awareness that any attempted defense against an American landing was almost destined to be futile. These plans acknowledged that the United States would quickly and efficiently establish substantial base complexes, regardless of the resistance encountered during initial landings. As a result, Japanese strategy shifted from attempting to prevent the creation of these bases to a more defensive posture, hoping that, by forcing American forces to build their infrastructure over Japanese casualties, the inevitable conflict would lead to a negotiated peace rather than unconditional surrender. This approach aimed to maximize Japanese casualties, fully aware that such sacrifices could potentially serve as leverage in peace negotiations. By the end of 1944, the most senior levels of Japanese military command had come to fully comprehend the strategic implications behind American construction capabilities. Yet by that point, their ability to alter the overall course of the conflict or to effectively counter the relentless American engineering efforts was severely limited. The recognition of this reality came too late to significantly change the outcome of the war. The importance of American logistical and infrastructural prowess had already become a decisive factor, sealing the fate of Japanese resistance and contributing to the eventual Allied victory. The course of the war took a decisive turn with the fall of the Tojo government following Japan's loss at Saipan. This defeat became a stark indicator to Japanese military and political leaders that the rapid establishment of American air bases across the Pacific was rendering Japan increasingly vulnerable to relentless strategic bombing campaigns. As the United States ramped up its aerial offensive, it became clear that the construction of new bases and forward airfields on captured islands was not merely a logistical effort, but a pivotal element shaping the entire conflict. Japanese responses to this emerging threat showcased their acute awareness of the crucial importance of the Americans' ability to rapidly build and expand military installations in their bid for dominance. One of the most telling moments was the fierce, seemingly desperate defense of Eniwetok Atoll, which stands out in the history of the Pacific War. The Japanese forces stationed there inflicted more casualties on American troops than in any other battle during the Pacific Campaign. Their fierce resistance was driven by an understanding that, once captured, Eniwetok's airfields would serve as launching points for the American strategic bombing campaign against the Japanese homeland. This knowledge fueled their resolve, emphasizing that the resistance was not merely about holding terrain, but about delaying the inevitable buildup of American military power, crucial to their defeat. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kurabayashi's decision to abandon traditional, high-casualty banzai charges in favor of a well-planned, deliberate defensive strategy reflected a clear recognition of the broader strategic landscape. He understood that the construction of airfields and other military infrastructure would proceed regardless of Japanese efforts to prevent it. The true contest was about controlling the cost, both material and human, of this construction, thereby attempting to withstand the inevitable American buildup for as long as possible. Similarly, at Okinawa, the Japanese military adopted a strategy focused on resisting American forces for as long as feasible, fully aware that the island would eventually become a significant American military base. Their tactics included kamikaze attacks against naval targets designed to hinder the American fleet's logistical and operational capabilities, even while accepting that the central objective, a strategic American intrusion, was ultimately unavoidable. Colonel Yahara's defensive plans underscored this pragmatic acceptance of the American approach to construction. His operational strategy did not aim to prevent the Americans from establishing airfields and port facilities, but focused instead on increasing the costs inflicted on their logistical and engineering efforts. This approach demonstrated a clear strategic understanding that the Americans' engineering capabilities posed a fundamental challenge. Throughout these encounters, the progression from initial surprise at the rapid American construction efforts, through recognition of their significance, to strategic adaptation, illustrates that Japanese military leaders were not blind to the profound implications of American industrial capacity. Although detailed Japanese records of their observations and intelligence assessments did not largely survive, the overarching pattern of their responses indicates a deep awareness of the new technological and organizational realities. Indeed, the very nature of Japanese strategic decision-making during this period serves as a form of historical testimony. Through their actions, whether in defensive plans, tactical adjustments, or resource allocation, the Japanese military communicated their comprehension of an emerging new reality, the superiority of American industrial and logistical output. While written accounts and personal testimonies are limited due to the destruction of records and the impossibility of capturing every soldier's and officer's personal feelings, the strategic choices they made reveal a story of evolving awareness and reactive adaptation. Their military doctrine, operations, and encounters with American construction capabilities tell a narrative more convincingly through statistics, strategic outcomes, and broad patterns than through the preserved voices of individuals. The devastation and loss of Japanese military archives and personal narratives leave gaps in understanding the subjective experience. The shock, dismay, or determination faced by individual Japanese soldiers and officers as they confronted the overwhelming industrial might of the Americans. Nonetheless, the surviving evidence, comprising construction statistics, strategic directives, limited post-war testimonies, and military analyses, composes a powerful story of how the Japanese military recognized and responded, albeit belatedly, to the scale and significance of American industrialization. What the Japanese forces encountered was unprecedented in the annals of warfare, a full-scale industrial mobilization aimed explicitly at military infrastructure. This industrialization enabled rapid, large-scale construction that fundamentally shifted the tempo and scope of the Pacific conflict. For example, the astonishing speed with which the Americans completed the airstrip on the island of Espiritu Santo, approximately 20 days, demonstrated an industrial capacity that had no counterpart before the war. Similarly, the rapid 9-hour rehabilitation of the airfield on Tarawa and the construction of extensive B-29 bomber bases on Tinian, while fierce fighting raged around them, exemplified a level of logistical and engineering excellence that seemed to defy conventional military expectations. These achievements transcended mere engineering prowess. They symbolized organizational superiority and industrial efficiency that seared into the minds of Japanese strategists a sobering reality. Once the Americans established a foothold and began this rapid infrastructure development, Japanese defeat became not just likely, but inevitable. For military professionals in Japan who grasped these implications deeply, witnessing the scale and speed of the depth and speed at which modern warfare could be reshaped by technological and industrial advances, fundamentally altering the very nature of combat itself. While Japanese defenses, painstakingly assembled over months through manual effort and traditional methods, could be expected to slow or impede an invading force, they increasingly became a symbol of the past, a testament to an era where physical labor and limited technology defined military resilience. In stark contrast, American engineers, armed with the most advanced machinery and prefabricated materials, could establish new military bases and logistical hubs within mere days or weeks, effectively rewriting the timeline of the Pacific conflict. This rapid construction capability had profound strategic implications. It allowed the United States to execute its island-hopping campaign with unprecedented speed, bypassing heavily fortified Japanese positions instead of engaging in costly assaults. The compressed schedule meant that victories, once forecasted to take years to achieve, could be realized within a fraction of that time, sometimes in just months. Moreover, this swift buildup brought Japan into the range of American strategic bombers far earlier than Japanese military planners had anticipated, eroding their defensive edge and exposing their vulnerabilities long before expected. Fundamentally, the importance of industrial capacity in warfare became painfully clear during this period. The Pacific War was no longer solely a contest of soldiers, ships, and aircraft. It evolved into a direct confrontation between industrial systems and military forces. From the perspective of Japanese military leadership, this realization was ominous, suggesting that victory would increasingly depend not just on battlefield tactics, but on a nation's ability to sustain industrial production and logistical support at scale. Survivors' accounts of Japanese soldiers and commanders often expressed astonishment at the speed and efficiency of American construction efforts. Witnessing the rapid development of airstrips and bases, they understood that American logistical and engineering superiority was a decisive factor. As the war progressed, strategic decisions made by Japanese leaders reflected a growing awareness of this reality. Even as they prepared desperate defenses in places like Iwo Jima and Okinawa, they recognized that American bases would be established regardless of land resistance, making these efforts ultimately futile. The kamikaze tactics, which sought to inflict maximum damage through suicidal attacks, represented an asymmetric response, an attempt to offset material and industrial superiority through a form of desperate heroism. Yet these tactics could not alter the underlying industrial imbalance. The final chapter of this struggle was less about individual heroism and more about the strategic and industrial inevitability that the United States possessed the capacity to build, project, and sustain formidable forces across vast oceanic distances at speeds and scales that Japan's traditional military model could not counter. The surrender of Japan on August 15, 1945, encapsulated this realization. In his speech, Emperor Hirohito discussed the advent of a new and most cruel atomic bomb, but he also referenced the deteriorating war situation, a situation that had increasingly become dictated by the relentless expansion of American industrial power. The subtle acknowledgement that continued resistance was futile was grounded in the understanding that American forces were capable of projecting industrial might across the Pacific with a rapidity and scale that rendered further contest pointless. This new ethos was embodied in the motto of the Corps of Engineers, Constimus Batumimus, meaning we build, we fight. It signified a paradigm shift in warfare. Combat engineers capable of constructing airstrips, bases, and logistical hubs at industrial speeds, even under fire. For Japanese soldiers witnessing this phenomenon firsthand, it seemed almost like encountering the future of warfare itself, where spiritual resolve alone could no longer compensate for an adversary wielding bulldozers, pre-manufactured modules, and an unparalleled organizational capacity to mobilize resources. The construction of 6,000-foot-long airstrips in as few as 20 days exemplified not just engineering prowess, but a symbolic departure from traditional battlefield tactics, an entirely new form of warfare that Japanese military doctrine had not been prepared to confront. What matters most in recounting Japanese encounters with American industrial and logistical capabilities is less what was articulated in strategic plans or documented in records, and far more what was demonstrably achieved through concrete action. These actions, the rapid construction of military infrastructure, the adaptive strategic responses, and the eventual realization and acceptance of defeat, speak volumes louder than any surviving documents or spoken testimonies. They reveal that Japan's military, over the course of the conflict, gradually understood it was fighting not merely an enemy in the conventional sense, but an industrial system that could outmatch traditional military virtues with speed, scale, and technological sophistication. The legacy of this encounter extended well beyond the final days of World War II. The demonstration of industrialized military construction as a decisive element in modern warfare revealed in a profound and dramatic way how warfare itself was evolving. This transformation underscored that future conflicts would hinge as much on industrial capacity as on battlefield heroics, forever reshaping the nature of military strategy and operational planning in the decades to come. The role played by the construction battalions, or CBS, situated in the Pacific Theater, swiftly became an indelible aspect of modern military operations, fundamentally transforming how wars could be fought and won in the 20th century. Their ability to rapidly establish strategic military bases, provide essential logistical support over vast expanses of ocean and land, and outpace adversaries in construction, building faster than enemies could demolish, marked a revolutionary shift in warfare strategy. These capabilities, first witnessed and marveled at by the astonished Japanese forces during their campaigns across the Pacific, have since remained central to contemporary military planning and doctrine. For historians studying this remarkable chapter of military history, One of the most frustrating obstacles is the scant documentation of Japanese perspectives on American construction prowess. The limited availability of personal accounts, these narratives that would imbue the story with emotional resonance, creates a gap in the historical record. It is a source of frustration because, without such detailed human stories, the impact and significance of the construction efforts can seem somewhat abstract, reduced merely to numbers and technical achievements. Yet this absence also serves as a poignant reminder that history is often shaped not just by the visible, tangible systems and capabilities, but also by the understanding and frameworks that people of the time lacked to grasp their true importance. The Japanese forces, who witnessed firsthand the astonishing speed with which American engineers constructed airfields on islands that were once jungle, coral, or otherwise seemingly inhospitable terrain, observed a military revolution unfolding in real time. These observers experienced the birth of a new paradigm, one where the tempo of military construction and logistical support could significantly outstrip traditional notions of warfare logistics. They saw airstrips emerging as quickly as in a matter of days rather than months, and these airfields promptly becoming operational hubs for air power projection. The critical numbers associated with these innovations speak volumes across decades. By the conclusion of the Pacific Campaign, American construction units had built approximately 111 major airstrips, along with 441 auxiliary airfields. These facilities provided the basis of operation for an extraordinary force, around 1.5 million men, an entire military infrastructure that could be established in mere weeks or months, fundamentally altering the pace and scope of the conflict. For the Japanese forces observing these endeavors, the scene was nothing short of extraordinary. They witnessed bases rising from the jungle depths and coral reefs, transforming once impossible terrain into fully functional operational zones within days. An astonishing feat that defied prior military norms. These developments signified more than just impressive statistics. They embodied a new future of warfare, characterized by speed, efficiency, and industrial capacity. They symbolized an arrival of a military paradigm where the tempo of construction and logistical support could decisively influence the outcome of battles and campaigns. The transformation of the Pacific theater through American construction capability represents arguably one of the most decisive yet under-recognized factors in the overall outcome of the conflict. While Japanese fighters could often match American soldiers in courage and sometimes even surpass their tactical skills, they found themselves at a distinct disadvantage against the industrial might that powered American rapid construction and logistics systems. The ability to turn captured islands into fully equipped offensive bases in an unprecedentedly short period was a feat of organizational and industrial superiority that proved decisive time and again. This exceptional level of industrial efficiency and organizational coordination, embodied by the efforts of the construction battalions and their remarkable achievements, proved to be as pivotal in shaping the course of the Pacific War as any individual naval battle or aerial combat. In fact, the success of American military strategy in the Pacific was fundamentally rooted in this capability, one that accelerated the campaign's progress and dictated its ultimate outcome, highlighting the importance of engineering, logistics, and industrial capacity as central components of modern warfare.